we're presenting to you today. And there's a lot of details in this budget, and as folks that have gone through this process with us know, it's a process, and today is not the start of that process, but is actually well into that process. I want to start by thanking Shannon and Ron and the rest of their team for an incredible amount of work that has gone into the budget. And particularly, this is Shannon's first time doing it. There's a lot in here. I'm really grateful to you both for everything you put into it. So this year also includes a capital budget. Where a few years back, under the leadership of Mayor Harp, the city started doing capital budgets every 2 years in order to save money on bonding, and we continued that process. And this is one of the years where we issue a capital budget as well. So for many months now, city departments have worked very hard with our budget office to come up with this document. And we're presenting that to you today and to the alders as required by our charter, that we are required to submit the mayor's budget by March 1st. Of course, March 1st is weekend, so we're submitting it today. The budget is a $703.7 million budget from the general fund, which is overall a 3.6% increase, or around a $24.6 million increase from last year's budget. In addition, the budget includes a $60 million capital fund and $62.6 million in special revenue as well, special funds. The special funds are, of course, grant funds that the city receives from a variety of different sources. I want to give some big picture, and then I'll go into some of the details on the budget. It's a time of tremendous uncertainty, right? I think we've all felt that in the last month. There's a lot of chaos coming from Washington, D.C. with threats of federal funding freezes. We're also anticipating the potential for draconian cuts by the federal government and Congress in the year to come. In the city of New Haven, we're proud to say that we're charting a different course and continue to chart a different course than what this current federal administration is doing. We're a local government that is professional. We're a local government that is reliable. We're a local government that is predictable. This is a city budget that is responsible and provides uninterrupted services for residents, supports our most vulnerable residents. We treat our city employees with respect, with gratitude for the work that you all do every day, unlike what we are seeing from our national leadership. And we work very hard to meet the long-term financial obligations as a city. While the federal government is fraught with uncertainty, our local momentum in the city continues with new development, growth in housing, in affordable housing, growth in population, new small businesses opening up, and so on. And we're committed to doing everything in our power to continue providing the services that we believe our residents want and deserve. Over the last 5 years since I've been mayor, we've made a ton of progress. And of course, we have a lot more work to do ahead of us, but we've made a ton of progress. On the revenue side, the city continues to grow, and that growth significantly impacts our ability to collect tax revenue, which helps drive our services and pay for the very things that our residents want. We've seen, thanks to the leadership of our state legislators, payment in lieu of taxes from the state dramatically increase, and yet again, this year it has increased. It's more than double, and this year in the budget it's over $100 million, $101 million going to the city from a payment in lieu of taxes program. And the Yale annual payment, thanks to the leadership of Peter Salovey and our lively dialogue back and forth, has resulted in a pretty significant increase in their funding from $13 million a few years ago to this year it's $26.7 million that is coming to the budget from Yale. On the expense side, we're working very hard to address the long-term liabilities of the city that gobble up the expenses and make it more difficult for us to fund a lot of things that people really care about, whether it's making sure public safety or our roads are fixed or that we support our individuals that are currently experiencing homelessness. Pensions, we're working very hard to address the long-term liability of our pensions. We're investing more in our pensions than ever before and using more realistic estimates as to what their gains, our investment gains will have, so that it forces us to pay more into our pensions, so in the long term we hand our kids a city that's more financially stable. With debt, we over the past 5 years have capped the debt that we have issued to $30 million each year. We do it every other year, so it's $60 million total. And this budget year is no different. We will be allocating and proposing to the alders a $60 million capital budget. And that is starting to help our debt service payments go down, and it allows us again to free up funds to pay for other important things. We're seeing results. We've had 5 straight years of balanced budgets that include no gimmicks. We've seen our bond ratings consistently improve from rating agencies. We've built up $50 million in reserves in our rainy day fund, which is crucial not only to helping improve our bond ratings, but is also important should we hit upon those difficult times as a city. Of course, we still have a lot more work to do. Our pensions costs continue to rise, our fixed costs will continue to rise, debt service will continue to be a large portion of the budget as well. And in this coming year, and probably the next 4 years, we anticipate potentially facing some challenging financial times. Specific to this proposed budget, in recent years we've been in a position to strengthen and expand many of the city services while also stabilizing our financial outlook. And that's from housing to public safety to education to youth to parks. We're continuing to work to ensure that our residents have the support that they need. But this year, we're encountering a very different budget environment, given the change in the federal administration and the actions of the Trump administration. And given the unpredictability of the federal budget, we're proposing a city budget that generally maintains current levels of service, but does not make significant new financial commitments or initiate new programs. However, we will continue the momentum of the past, and I'd like to talk about a couple of categories there. I want to start with education. Public schools are facing a deep challenge across the state, and our city is not alone. As folks have seen, there's been a lot of dialogue across the state, the 119K Commission, talking about disconnected youth, and many municipalities like ours were grateful to receive the ESSER funds, the increase in funds for a brief period that was a federal pass-through to through the state to our districts, but those funds are drying up. And the reality is, in many cases, education systems are in crisis, are in budget crisis. I regularly communicate with other mayors across the state, and many mayors are facing serious challenges. In New Haven, last year we had a massive deficit in our New Haven public school system. We worked with the alders to help ameliorate that deficit, and Dr. Negron made some cuts to make this year work. This year, as the Board of Education puts together its budget, we will see another significant deficit. And to make a point on it, for our entire school system, there's 53 social workers for 19,000 kids. That's 358 students per social worker. That's a ridiculous caseload. There's 46 school counselors, 408 students per school counselor. It's just not right. There are 26 librarians for 41 schools. Our schools need more resources. And the primary way that our funding from schools comes is from state supports through the educational cost share formula. The state must do more. The state's base contribution is currently $11,525 per student. That amount hasn't increased in over a decade. And you know what has increased otherwise? Everything. Everything else has increased in costs. And that's in our own personal budgets, but it's also in teacher salaries, it's in student support services, facilities costs, school building and transportation costs. Everything has gone up, yet that foundation amount that the ECS cost share is based on, that determines how much funding we get from the state, has remained the same for over a decade. Inflation over that period has averaged 2.77% per year. So who's been picking up the bill? Municipalities have, through property taxes. And the city has not been immune to that. We have done our part. The City of New Haven and the Board of Alders have been very, very supportive of these increases of Board of Education. We have done our part. We've increased our municipal share towards education funding by over 50% in the past 5 years, which is a remarkable number. And this year's budget includes a $5 million increase from last year's budgeted line item to what is included in this budget. In addition, We are putting $1.5 million, we're proposing to put $1.5 million of American Rescue Plan funds into the extension of the New Haven Tutoring Initiative that has been hugely successful, so that we can continue that initiative. And we're putting $15 million of capital improvements into our schools. But our schools need more, and the state must do its part. On public safety, the new police contract has been very successful already at attracting new applicants, both lateral hires and new applicants to the police force, and on retaining officers. It's a significant cost to the city, and that is part of why in this budget we needed to increase it, because the new police contract, which is something that we heard from residents across the city, and we've done the right thing by ensuring that we have salaries that are much more competitive, but it is one of the reasons why the budget is larger than before. We've also put $4 million in capital funds to public safety, including new body cameras for the officers, on top of the ongoing installation of cameras across the city that are ARPA funded from public safety. And of course on housing, which is always one of our priorities, last year's budget contained a significant increase in our investment in housing with a lot of different housing code inspectors and related staff. And we will continue to advance that work and continue to support with a large financial contribution from the city towards our initiatives for individuals experiencing homelessness, which will again be $1.6 million. On the financial side, stability side, there are no budget gimmicks in this budget. We are investing historic amounts in the pension. $93 million of an over $700 million general fund budget are going towards pensions. You think about that, that's over 10% of our budget's going towards pensions so that we can get that long-term liability down. Debt service will continue to be a large part of the budget. We're working to chip away at that as well. The budget includes a tax increase. It includes a small tax increase. Things cost money. And there are some folks out there that have a narrative that if you're just more efficient, you're going to be able to do more with less, and that is just not true. Goodness knows we try, and goodness knows every day in this building we try to identify efficiencies, but things cost money. The increase that we're proposing is 0.9 mils, which is effectively a 2.3% increase in taxes, from 38.5 mils to 39.4 mils. With the exception of these last 2 years, this is the lowest tax rate we have had in the last 2 decades. Our taxes are lower than almost all of our other counterparts out there, the larger cities, Bridgeport, Hartford, Waterbury. Our taxes are lower than Hamden's, our taxes are lower than West Haven's, our taxes are high. But they're lower than many of our counterparts, and we try as much as we can to keep them within reason while ensuring that we deliver on the services that our residents deserve and demand. Today I'm submitting my proposal to the Board of Alders, and moving forward, the Board of Alders Finance Committee will have multiple public workshops and hearings and deliberations, and so that will go through March, April, and May until they finally adopt an amended budget. And I'll be hosting 2 budget town halls where residents can learn more about the budget, ask questions, and share their thoughts. Those are excuse me, Tuesday, March 18th at 6 p.m. and Wednesday, March 26th at 6 p.m. We haven't finalized the locations yet, but we will let folks know about that. Per the charter, the final budget must be approved by the Board of Alders by the first Monday in June, which is June 2nd. I just want to finish off by saying I think we should be really proud as a city of how far we have come to really expand the services that New Haven residents are receiving, while at the same time working very hard to deliver balanced budgets and chip away at our long-term financial obligations. We've got a lot more work to do, but I see a lot of city employees here. I'm really grateful for everything that you do for our city every day. We've got a journey ahead of us. Questions from folks?
Does this proposed budget include any new full-time positions, and so how many, and
yes.
What are they?
Good question. I know Tom Breen's always got the good questions here. So there's 13 total.
6 of those are revenue generating.
Why don't you come up and talk about it?
There There are 13 new positions, and of those positions, 6 of those are revenue generating. So they'll bring more revenue into the city as a result.
And what, could you give a few examples of what they are?
We have added 2 building inspectors. There's significant economic development activity going on through the city. Yale has significant capital plans, and we need to make sure we have enough building inspectors in order to do all of the work. We also have 4 parking enforcement personnel. They will also ensure that things move smoothly. They will also generate some additional revenue for the city. And then there's some positions that'll just improve efficiency and transparency in our financial processes and just help the city move along and streamline our operations for smoother service delivery.
How has the grand list changed, in particular the taxable grants?
It's essentially flat year over year. I mean, it's in between a reassessment. We did see some increase in personal property, which offset some weakness in real estate and motor vehicles. But all in all, it's slight decrease. Sure.
So on the previous question, and Shannon, you know the numbers better than I, but this budget does have a pretty significant increase in building permit revenue, mostly driven by Yale's development. And so I think that's something important to note, which is why we want additional building inspectors to make sure that we can process through that. But it's also a strong indication of the direction the city is going in, and it helps us budgetarily in addition to development of the city. With the grant list, it's complicated. It's slightly down from the previous year, and you may have seen there was an article in the New Haven Register about this. And there's a number of reasons that it's down. I frankly was pretty surprised by it because we've seen so much growth in the city, a lot of new buildings that slowly over time those tax revenues are starting to come online. The grand list is divided into 3 buckets, right? Personal property is up, motor vehicles is slightly down, and then real estate taxes, which is taxes on buildings across the city, residential and commercial, is slightly down as well. So on motor vehicles, the primary reason it is down is because the state legislature and the governor proposed a change in the way that we assess. We're required to assess motor vehicles. I think you did an article on this last year, moving from NADA to MSRP. And because of that, municipalities across the state lost significant grand list, and many of my colleagues out there were talking about how their grand list went down as well. So our motor vehicle grand list went down pretty significantly. The state legislature thankfully changed the way that the depreciation occurs. We're going to be asking the alders to adopt this change because it's a local option, and that reduces the negative impact by the grand list. And not to get into too many details, but the state was initially requiring that the depreciation for vehicles happen 85% the first year, 80% the second year, and so on. And the state has given us the option now to have 90% the first year, 90 or 85 the second, and so on. And so one of the components of what I propose to the alders will be for us to adopt that change, which makes the motor vehicle grand list go down a little bit less and gets us a little bit more revenue. On the real estate side, there's a number of things that have impacted that. One small impact on it going down was the state also passed a veterans tax exemption for certain veterans with disabilities. And that's made a small impact negatively on our grant list. While we admire the state for wanting to do the right thing, I'd say with both the change of motor vehicle taxes and the veterans exemption, the state passed those things and put no money towards municipalities to help us address the impact. And so basically the state said, you're required to do these things, and now all municipalities across the state are scrambling to figure out how to address the drop in our grand list, and we are the ones raising taxes to address that. The other component on real estate is 300 George Street. As you recall, Yale purchased the building and took that partially off the tax rolls currently. So they took 70% of the building off the tax rolls for Yale operations, 30% they'll continue to pay taxes on. However, as you may recall, part of our agreement with Yale is that for the first 3 years, they'll pay 100% of the tax revenue. So we don't see that in the grant list or in our tax revenue, but we do see that in the increase to the Yale's voluntary payment. And then the final component is, this is not a reval year, we're several years out after that, but we're starting to see of some of the settlements for people that have appealed their valuations, and that also has an impact on reducing the size of the grant list. Too much detail? Other questions?
Mayor, with the federal funding, just is there a ballpark on what the city typically sees, sort of where it usually goes, and sort of what's the next step if, like you said, you see freezes or cuts? How do you sort of?
Yeah, this is a great question. So as I mentioned, we have around $60 million of special funds allocated for this year's budget, and a huge portion of those are federal. And those also, I would mention, don't include other funds that go to the New Haven Board of Education. Title I, for example, is a pretty significant amount of funding. And we discussed, do we want to anticipate what happens and present two budgets to the Board of Alders or put some funding aside? And the reality is, I think anyone watching the news is like, your guess is as good as mine of what's going on at the Capitol and how this is going to impact us. It's a ridiculous city, for lack of a better word, when we look at what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now. And we felt that we were best, because we don't know exactly what kind of cuts are going to happen, what the timeline might be for those cuts, whether the state is willing to step up and help municipalities if there are significant cuts. These are all significant unknowns that we felt we should present a budget that didn't have a lot of new programs, but that was, primarily status quo. And should those massive cuts start to happen, we will be at a conversation with the Board of Alders and engage with the public as to our next steps. And there's a possibility that mid-year we could potentially change the budget. But at this point, there's so many unknowns that we felt we should just focus on what we can control.
What would you have?
Ridiculous city is, I think, a quote people should use.
What would you have included in the budget in a more maybe stable federal environment?
I don't know, there's a lot of things that we need more of, right? I think that when you look at our education system, it would be good if we could even do more there. And just given the strains on our taxes and the fact that we have done so much already, it's really time for the state to step up here, in my very, very strong view, but it would be good to do more there. When you knock on people's doors around the city, what do they care about? They care about public safety, they care about our schools, they care about housing, and they care about their roads being paved and sidewalks being fixed. Ideally, we put a lot more in all those buckets.
ARPA and Yale's increased. So I know the Yale city deal from a number of years ago was a 6-year term, 5 years with a $10 million per year increase in the last 2. I forget, is this the final year of Yale's commitment?
No, we have a
So
couple.
there's,
Yeah.
okay. And then for ARPA, the one-time federal American Rescue Plan Act money, so that had to be obligated by the end of 24 and I think spent by the end of 26. Is that, so do you have any left? Is that figuring into this budget at
Do you want
all?
to take it?
And
Sure.
are there any considerations the city has about that money no longer existing very soon?
Well, we've allocated all of the funds. They've all been, they had to be obligated by the end of this year, or excuse me, by the end of 2024, so that occurred. And we're still spending down the revenue on projects that have been approved by the Board of Alders. It's still moving forward. We still have some of the money left to continue the projects that it's already been allocated for. Does that answer your question?
Can you just get your name and title, please?
Shannon McHugh, Budget Director.
Just to add to that, so the guidance that we have received is that we can move ARPA money between different programs that are already approved. And so the last year's budget had, for example, a revenue replacement budget item that we did not use because we had a surplus. And so we've allocated that bucket into some other programs that were existing. So for example, the New Haven Tutoring Initiative, we have allocated $1.5 million of that revenue replacement money into that initiative. We put a little bit into police overtime and a couple of other things like that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, can you just break down again the capital budget, or if you can clarify, is it that if the Department of Education has a significant deficit this year, you guys would tap into the 60 million, or is it only federal funding for the?
So our capital budget is money that we borrow for different, typically construction-related projects, to purchase vehicles as well, like a fire truck or a snowplow, to do repairs on schools. So it's like brick and mortar type of things. And we don't want to overborrow, because then we have to pay, just like you pay your mortgage on your house over the years. So we limit that to $60 million every several years. We put $15 million of that into repairs for our school system, because a lot of our buildings, as you I'm sure have seen, are struggling now with mold and HVAC issues, and you name it, our buildings are struggling. $15 million sounds like a lot, but we need a lot more funding, and we are looking to potentially apply for some additional school construction funding from the state to help address some of that as well. You were asking specifically about school funding?
Yeah, you mentioned something along the lines like we may be seeing a big deficit from the Department of Education this year again. So, like, is there any money, and that you mentioned that we set some money aside in case that happens?
Right, so New Haven Public, so there's a couple of things. When you say Department of Education, I think of the federal government.
Oh,
New Haven Public Schools is working to compile their budget now, and they get revenues from another number of different buckets. A large portion of it comes from the city of New Haven, another large portion of it comes from the state, and then they get a lot of federal funding. And we, on the city side, our portion of the budget towards New Haven Public Schools, we've increased that over the past 5 years by over 50%. So we've dramatically increased our payments to New Haven Public Schools. They will, over the next month or so, finalize their budget using some assumptions of how much they think they're going to get from the city, because our budget's not approved yet. It has to go through the Board of Alders, and how much funding they're going to get from the state. And I know that with the current funding that the city that I'm proposing to the Board of Alders, coupled with what the governor has proposed from the state, it is not even close to enough to adequately fund our schools. And that is why I have made very, very clear that we have done our part over and over and over again. We need to see the state increase their funding to not just New Haven Public Schools, but schools across the state, particularly those schools that support young learners, that are multilingual learners, that are experiencing poverty, that are classified as special education students, because those students desperately need more support in our school system. And we'll be advocating for that and continue to advocate that at the state level. If we're not able to get those funds, the reality is New Haven Public Schools is going to have to make even more cuts to a system that already doesn't have enough funding.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
I have,
Maybe this can be our last one, and I can hang out afterwards if people have a question.
thank you so much. I have
And
a
2 New Haven Independent reporters. This is brutal, guys.
I have a question about city staff right now. How many vacancies are there currently, and are there going to be any big eliminations in this budget?
No eliminations of positions. I can get you the number on vacancies. I don't have it off the top of my head. Okay. Thanks, everybody.